Hello, this is a great pleasure for me to introduce Belinda Tato, founding member at Ecosistema Urbano. This is a very well-known and very award office that started working in 2000. Since then, they have been working national and international, focusing their work in the field of urbanism and architecture, specifically in social urban design. Ecosistema Urbano has a remarkable experience planning and developing innovative urban environments and suppressive urban elements focused in creating a better environment for people. Public participation in the process of design is another important characteristic of their projects that helps to create social interaction within communities and their relationship with the environment. Some examples of these projects of urban action and intervention in cities can be found in cities in Europe, America, North and South, and in Asia. Boulevard Vallecas, Dream Hamar, the Plan for Asunción are some of the projects, but you can find more in their webpage. They also have an important trajectory in the academic field, teaching in the most prestigious institutions worldwide, like Harvard, Yale, Cornell, just to list a few. Now I let you enjoy the conference of Belinda Tato.
Hello, my name is Belinda Tato. Thank you so much for the invitation to join the event. I'm going to be talking about the work of my firm, Ecosistema Urbano, which I co-founded with José Luis Vallejo in year 2000. So over the last 20 years, we had the opportunity to work in many different places around the world, and that was an amazing opportunity to be exposed to different urban realities, social realities, economic realities, and environmental realities. So it's been a kind of a continuous learning process throughout these years. So these are kind of the points or the topics that we've been focusing on our work. So the first one is the environmental. How can we introduce climatic comfort in urban environments? How can we improve and enhance urban ecosystems? And how can we make them more resilient? In terms of social, how our work can be educational? How can we engage the people in the design processes? And how can we create or work towards equity with our transformation or landscape projects? In terms of technology, it's also been an exciting time to start exploring new possibilities of interaction and engagement through the technology. So we've been kind of exploring different tools, and we also like to think that we're designing open processes. So I was a student in the 90s, and at that time, all the focus was put into geometry, design as an isolated kind of in a bubble kind of solution. So over these years, we developed a very intense interest in the social part. So how can our work introduce people's dreams, expectations, concerns, and how can we also create the channels for this communication to be meaningful and efficient? So we've been testing solutions in every possible way throughout these years, and again, it's a continuous learning process. So this is a diagram that shows this kind of parallelism between the design line and the social line, and it's a kind of continuous loop of learning and testing. So how can we design, how can we incorporate the feedback or through different kind of activities, how can we introduce this social component into our design, and how this design can actually be reintroduced or presented to the social again. We've also tested this idea of urban action. So instead of just talking in an abstract way about possibilities, how can we test these possibilities as a one-to-one model, as a mock-up in the public space for people to react to? Another thing that we've been exploring is this idea of the creation of a lab. So what would happen if actually our role didn't end once we deliver the final design, but it's more a kind of an office or a management space that could be created for a greater contribution or greater collaboration between the different stakeholders for the transformation of the city. So we've been exploring also this idea. So this is a kind of a diagram that shows, the kind of a way that we're rethinking the public spaces about the design, the social, and the creation of a lab for the continuation of the transformation. So I'm going to be presenting several works that we developed over the last few years around these topics. So the first topic is environmental awareness. So this is a project in the outer skirts of Madrid, in Rivas, in which, as you can see, is very much a kind of residential area for mainly commuters who come to Madrid to work every single day. But actually, this is a very residential area, which is not very exciting public space. So everyone has their own swimming pool, so they don't have to share. So this was a competition for the creation of a kindergarten. So it was a building for kids between 0 and 3 years old. And because of the context in Spain and the environmental issues that we have, it was very important to actually introduce a system to be able to purify and clean the used waters from the building so that it could be reused for the irrigation of the public space or garden that we wanted to create. So we collaborated with a company that actually works specifically on this by the creation of a microfight system that actually purifies the wastewater from the building so that it can actually be reused. So the wastewater of the building goes into this lagoon and it gets filtered first, and then it gets filtered by the plants, and then it can be stored underground so it can be reused for the irrigation. So this made total sense, not only because we think that every landscape that we're creating is educational, but also in this particular case because we're in front of an educational building, because this is a school. So we really thought that it was interesting and necessary to make this very obvious, not only for architects and events like this, like sharing these technical solutions, but also to make this a kind of a statement in the city that everybody would be aware of and everybody would learn from. So this is a section in which we can see the building and how the water can get accumulated here at the bottom of the lagoon, and then it can be used for the irrigation of the topographies. Actually, the context is a kind of a harsh one. This is an industrial site, and there is a lot of trucks and traffic, so it's not the ideal place for a kindergarten. And that's why we work with the topography to create this a more sheltered space, so that it would be kind of a buffer area, public space, that we thought that was actually quite relevant in this particular environment in which public space is not that. So this is a kind of a close-up of the microfight plants that we're using. So they're floating in the water. And this is a picture from the beginning when the construction was just finalized. Here we can see the topographies that we created to create this kind of buffer public space. And this is a aerial view of the public space, some close-ups. So for us, it was quite important in such an environment to create this kind of idea of identity and public space that becomes relevant to the community. So it's been interesting to see how this has deployed over time. And actually, public space has become relevant, not only during school days, but also even in the weekends. So we also instance some kind of playful elements and playgrounds, again, to make the space functional and performative beyond school hours. So this is a picture of later on in time. As you can see here, the microfights are kind of grown. And yeah, and here you can see the kind of the green areas that we managed to produce because we're also kind of reutilizing the water. So again, the social component goes beyond the construction of the building and beyond the users, because this has become an icon and a landmark in the city of Rivas. And again, it has kind of this educational purpose so that people are aware of the performance of the building and the landscape beyond the users of the building. The second project within this category is a small project that we designed and implemented in Dordrecht in the Netherlands. So it was a competition to create a playful object in the public space. So we thought this idea that, I like to think that sustainability should be playful. And so it is a carousel that actually, with the play, and the movement created by the kids over the day, it creates an energy and stores it for the lighting in the evenings. So this is a technical section of the carousel, and this is how it looks. So it was interesting to go through all the procedures to actually get it built, because it has to meet a lot of requirements by the standards of the European Union. But it worked, we made it. And again, it's this idea of kind of embedding sustainability into our everyday life and kind of raising awareness about every possible resource, even from the early age. So yeah. So the next category is climatic comfort. So this is a project in Madrid. It's one of our earliest projects, and it was very remarkable at the time. So this is the city of Madrid. All the yellow areas are new development happening. There was a red area there that is the Vallecas, which developed scheme that was not extremely interesting. So it was basically the same block repeated, completely ignoring the conditions of orientation, topography, etc. So there was a department within the city of Madrid who was concerned about this type of development, which is very much against the kind of the lifestyle of Madrid or the lifestyle of Mediterranean environment. So they created this competition for this boulevard, which is 550 meters long and 50 meters wide. And the whole idea was to create a public space, a remarkable public space in a new urban area, in which the public space is not that exciting. So we got inspiration from this public space in the Malefna Square in Marrakech. It's a very flexible space that operates differently in the day and night. So during the day it's quite nothing actually, because it's very, very hot, but actually in the evenings it becomes a kind of a huge restaurant with all these pop-up restaurants. We also had to consider the climatic comfort because in Madrid, the conditions in the summer is very, very dry and very, very hot. So it's actually very uncomfortable to be outdoors during the day. So we realized and came to the conclusion that the best way to create this climatic comfort was by planting trees, because the trees are efficient throughout the year and they can be support for many other activities. The only issue with the trees is that they require a number of years until they create this kind of comfort. So our approach was like, okay, let's create a kind of a prosthesis or a temporary solution until the real trees are completely grown. So we got inspiration from this traditional architecture from the Middle East, in which you have these climate wind catchers, in which the air comes through the chimney and it gets in contact with wet material, so it creates a microclimate inside the construction. So with that same principles, we designed these structures in which the air gets in contact with the water atomizers, it gets cooler and therefore heavier, and it creates a microclimate at the ground level. So this is the picture of the street before the intervention. So it was already a kind of a brand new street, not that exciting in terms of public space, not exciting in terms of climatic comfort or kind of other quality. So as you can see, there was sidewalks, parking lanes, driving lanes, parking lane again, and another kind of boulevard in the middle. So it was a very wide street. And our approach was not only creating this kind of more visible structures, but also improve the condition of the street, completely. So this is one of the actions was to actually eliminate one of the parking lanes, and it became a kind of a tree lane. Another important feature was to introduce as much as recyclable or recycled materials as possible. Again, this is an educational approach. This is just a tiny project in the city of Madrid, but we really believe that we're kind of embedding knowledge every time that we're doing something. So here, for instance, we're seeing the bench, which is of recycled plastic, and also the flooring and the ground, which is from recycled tires from the cars. These are all standard materials that are already in the market, so we didn't have the possibility to produce new materials because it's a small project, but so we have to take off-the-shelf materials, and it was an interesting also learning process. This is the inside wall of the pavilion, so it has different species according to the different orientations, and this is how the pavilion looks in the day. So it has become, this used to be a crossroad, and now it's a kind of a public space that has attracted the attention of especially teenagers in the evenings of the summer. So it's a kind of a very active space, especially in the summer again. So here we can see how the street was reconfigured, and here we can see the sidewalk that was completely re-leveled with the rest, and it became something else. the parking lane, which became a 3-lane, and also the pre-existing benches that we didn't like them as they were, but didn't make any sense to kind of get rid of them. So we just relocated them, completely transforming the section of the street. So we are gaining space for pedestrians in the street. So again, the operation is not only about creating these 3 different structures, but also about creating a more pedestrian-friendly street. So this is the media tree that intending to become a kind of hub, social hub in the middle of the space that could operate as a kind of a huge TV. So it has a 360 degrees projection screen inside that it could be used for, again, for different kind of events. So this is an image of when they were testing the water systems, and these are different images of how the space has been used for different types of events. And again, the idea was to actually provide the conditions for people to use this space in many different ways. So embedding this idea of flexibility in the public space. So the third topic would be creative public engagement. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is something that we've been very interested in, that we continue to explore in different contexts and in different ways. So I'm going to be playing this video. So this was a competition launched by the city of Hamar in Norway. Originally they were looking for an artistic intervention in the main public space, but actually our approach was a little bit more kind of geared to engage in the local community, but also producing a final design that was the result of this kind of engagement process. So I'm going to be playing the video that we submitted for the competition. Okay, so we won the competition, and as you could see, the proposal was about transforming their original idea, which was about creating a kind of singular intervention in the public space into a process. So we wanted to create a kind of an open process that was able to engage both the local community, but also the global community, because we do have the technology that enable us to do that right now. So during the competition process, we called the proposal 1000 Square, because the idea was to test some of these ideas. So again, this process would allow to also create mock-ups and see how people would react to them, to actually being able to define or design the final public space after these experiences. We ended up calling it Dream Hamar. The city is called Hamar, as I mentioned. So the idea was like, okay, what is your dream for Hamar? So we had different components. We were fortunate enough to be able to rent this space that was actually facing the square. So we were working literally for the space in which we were, working. And so it was very beautiful. We transformed this space with very simple means, and it was a kind of our hub. So we held the workshops there. We had all sort of creative meetings. We also had the digital platform. So we were, in parallel sharing the information and, everything about the goals, but also about the results of the workshop. We also created an app, assuming that not everybody was willing or had the resources or the time to actually join the on-site event. So also always the question is, how can we create different kind of channels of communication to enable this participation be as efficient and as extensive as possible? So this is what the square looked like before any intervention happened. So when we were there, we were a little bit in shock because it's not very much a square. It was mostly parking lots and a street in between. So we also invited the artist Boa Mistura from Madrid to actually transform. So just in a couple of days, they transformed this parking lot into kind of a beautiful setting for having a meal. So we held these different kind of workshops and mock-ups and activities in the public space. So the whole point was to show through the experience that the space could be much more than a parking space. So we had this workshop with students from BUS in Bergen Architecture School. We also had this activity, which was the green hammer. So we had the cream hammer, green hammer, light hammer, play hammer, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so all of these enable us to start kind of, again, reaching out to the community. Another way of engaging the community was through the teenagers and the youth. So we created a collaboration with the city. So there were more than 1,400 kids actually creating possibilities and brainstorming themselves for the future of the square. So they produced these models and so on. So it was interesting because it was actually a little bit overwhelming, the amount of information and inputs that we gathered through the process. So at some point we had to kind of, get all of this together, filter it, and create a project that was kind of, the outcome of the whole process. So we did so. And the project included 4 different elements. So it was mostly the social ring, which was kind of conceived as a water feature for the summer and a skating rink for the winter. And it was built recently. And it has become a kind of a very popular space. One of the things that we discovered throughout the process was that actually the project was not only about the square, it was beyond the square, it was about the city center. Because actually the city center is really struggling, competing with all the shopping malls that are happening all over the place, because the shopping malls are comfortable climatically, for instance, both in summer and winter, and the city of Hamar is quite cold in the winter. So we really realized that it was not only about making a beautification project for the square, it was mostly about creating the possibilities of having activities. So it was about giving people the reason to come to the city center. So, the water feature and the skating feature, works toward that end. But not only that, but it was also because of the slight slope that the square has. The idea was to create a venue for activities. So there's been a number of concerts. So it was designed in such a way that it's actually a platform or the framework for more things to happen. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about 2 more projects. Asunción, which is in Paraguay. It's a completely different context, completely different scope as well. So it was an international competition for the city of Asunción, in particular it was a master plan for the historical center. So by reading the brief of the competition, we realized that there had been a lot of previous studies. There was a lot of feasibility studies and preliminary designs for the city center. So it was interesting to see that actually there was a lot of information already collected, but not much had been implemented. So we focus on that particular point of management and what could be the kind of the element to untangle this and to make things happen. So one of the strong portions of our proposal was the ASU lab, which is intended as a lab, as I was mentioning at the very beginning. So the ASU lab was a hub for communication, for facilitation. So it was a kind of an interface between the government and the citizens, and a kind of a way of rethinking the way things or projects get actually implemented. So we also identified the different topics in the city. So, you know, at a first approach, you could actually see maybe only the physical kind of configuration of the city and all the things that require attention. But actually there was a lot of environmental and socioeconomic layers that also require attention. Another thing that we did was like, okay, let us try not to start from scratch, which is very much a kind of an architectural approach. Let's try to start learning from different good practices and best practices from around the world. So we made this database from both institutional strategies, top down, and bottom up initiatives, because there's a number of very good practices and projects that could be implemented as they are. So we don't have to start again thinking from scratch. So the idea was to kind of create this kind of database of good practices and projects that were kind of implementable or very easily translated into the reality of Asunción. So we would kind of create this kind of global database, bring it to ASULab, and then from ASULab translate it into the context of Asunción. So another thing that was kind of interesting, again, was to identify what could be the prioritization kind of criteria. Because again, one of the challenges that usually cities have is that they have so many things to do, so many necessary projects or processes to get developed, but actually sometimes it's very difficult to kind of organize them around a timeline. So we also created this kind of potential timeline, giving priorities to different projects. So there was a number of kind of, let's say, 10 institutional projects that required the attention of the government. And we always envision the transformation of the city as a process, because we are aware that projects cannot be implemented all at once, and the cities do not have the resources to do everything at once. So we envision this as a transformation over time with different projects of different nature. But the thing that I wanted to point out today is that in parallel with the master plan, we also delivered this kind of collection of pilot projects. So there were more than 50 pilot projects. And the whole idea was to create this kind of catalog of possibilities with projects from range from $2,000 to, I don't know, to 2 million or to 20 million. So the idea is to give a catalog to the city of projects that are kind of small, medium, large, or extra large, so that they would never be the situation that there is, you know, that you don't have the big budget, so you cannot do it. There is possibilities. There are projects that can be implemented even if the budgets are kind of limited. Okay. So again, you know, how can we bring the social component into the design component? So we deliver a number of different activities to work with both the youth. One of the things that we identified is that actually there was very little connection between the kids who had been born in the city and had been living there forever and the historical center. So for some reason, the city center, the historical center, had been kind of neglected or forgotten over the last 20 years. So the idea was, how can we reconnect the youth with it? So we created these activities and this kind of cartoonish version of the most relevant buildings in the area. So they would have to create their own stories. They would have to have a kind of an activity at their school that they would somehow connect to their families, because it was to be implemented in the weekends. We also had kind of regular meetings with people, because there was a lot of, again, it's a kind of it's a project that has different layers of intervention and different areas of intervention. So of course it engaged different stakeholder groups, and it was very interesting to engage with different types of activities with each of them. Another thing that we did was to collaborate with the local university, and it was interesting to see that as an outcome of one of the workshops, students realized that they had been claiming a bike line for years. So they decided to do it themselves overnight. So it was interesting to see this kind of proactive kind of awareness also, like how can you become more active in your own city and not just kind of claiming it to do it from the institution. So they painted these bike lines overnight, and it was kind of an anonymous action in the news the following morning. So in this kind of pilot project catalog that I was mentioning before, one of the actions was also to kind of work with the canvas, with the party walls of the city, which are many. So they are kind of open, white, blank canvas that could be transformed into an asset for the city. So the city organized this art festival to transform these party walls into something else, and it was a beautiful intervention, inviting artists from all Latin America. And it was, again, an interesting way of engaging the civil society into the transformation of the city, so it became something relevant. And today with social media, it's very easy to share content and to kind of create interest in urban transformation actions. Okay, the next project is, again, a different context, but also kind of connects with many of the things that we've been mentioning. So this is West Palm Beach in the state of Florida in the USA. It was a competition.
Our proposal for West Palm Beach is based on the identification of opportunities, the definition of actions and strategies, and the achievement of key improvements towards a vision of a lively urban environment. As opportunities for intervention, we consider current values and aspects that could be enacted. The social context of West Palm Beach is marked by the effect of a general seasonal migration from colder places, an event-driven flow of people from a closer context, and a weekly and daily commute from low-density neighborhoods to the downtown area, all of it causing important fluctuations in population, economy, and urban activity, with the emergence of an even younger and more diverse population profile. Fluctuations are also present in climate, showing curves of heat, humidity, and rain that greatly influence urban activities, combined with temporary extreme weather events and the slow but steady rise of the sea level. Health is influenced by those climatic aspects and highly impacted by their surrounding urban environment. Still, West Palm Beach has a great potential for outdoor exercise and other health-related activities, reinforcing the image of the city as an ideal context for a healthy lifestyle. Mobility can greatly improve quality of life by changing a car-oriented A to B approach to one that injects life to the places along the journey, providing a more meaningful and pleasant way of experiencing the city, and ensuring accessibility, safety, and comfort, developing the city's great potential for sustainable mobility. Besides mobility infrastructure, a core value of the city are its sites, including not only the many attractive, valuable places in West Palm Beach, but also the underused spaces that have great potential to bring new activities and support a more diverse urban lifestyle. Highly connected to all other aspects is urban activity, usually concentrated around several sites with much room for expansion, showing a great economic potential linked to social and climatic fluctuations, empowered by impressive event organizational capabilities. Society, climate, health, mobility, sites, and activity are the key aspects in improving the urban experience of West Palm Beach. Linking them together allows us to understand the values that can be maximized and the opportunities that can be developed for enhancing the city's quality of life.
Okay, so that was a competition that we entered in year 2017. It was a very interesting initiative led by the city of West Palm Beach together with the Van Allen Institute from New York. So they were looking for ideas to 3 different spaces. The first one was the waterfront. So the waterfront, So the waterfront is going to be exposed to sea level rise in the next 100 years, but it's not so badly exposed as Palm Beach is going to be, which you can see in the right. So the waterfront is kind of very neat, not very interesting, and we will see it afterwards, but it's obviously very exposed to these kind of climatic events. And so here, this is how it looks today. So it's actually very interesting because the city does not have that many opportunities to be exposed to the water at all. And as you can see, the waterfront is quite empty and there's nothing really happening except for two particular moments during the year. So that is one music festival that is extremely successful, as you can see, and it becomes extremely busy, and also the boat festival. So somehow it's a very, very slow, very little busy throughout the whole year, except for 2 particular moments. Then we have the passageways, which are these kind of alleys that are kind of leftover spaces, which are used for collection of waste or for the delivery of goods and so on. But actually they are kind of a remarkable opportunity for the city to rethink themselves. But as they are today, they're not interesting at all. And then the Banyan Garage, which is a building from the 70s, It's a building that is municipal. It belongs to the city, and is very well located. So the competition brief was asking for solutions in every possible way. So there wasn't a required program or anything in particular. It was very much up to the teams to think about the future of the building. So this is how it looks today. So yeah, so this was our strategy. It was kind of, you know, based on these 5 principles: renaturalize, connect, activate, involve, and condition in terms of climatic. And this is what we did. So we were working on the waterfront to make it a little bit more connected to the city by the extending the streets, but also make it more pedestrian friendly and connecting it to the existing pedestrian networks. So it was an opportunity not only to improve the waterfront itself, but also an opportunity to connect better the downtown itself, but also the downtown with the neighborhoods. Okay, so we were kind of reviewing all the existing mobility systems. So this is the Flagger Drive, which is kind of this waterfront line, which is basically today dedicated or devoted to cars. We were kind of making a more shared space, continuous space, but also creating this kind of, we will see afterwards, pavilions on top of the water. So the renaturalization, how can we make the limit? How can we blend the nature and the city in a more kind of beautiful way? So we designed these different kind of solutions. So depending on the space, it would be a different one. But the whole idea was to make a kind of a more fluid and permeable connection between the city and the water systems. So we introduced these thematic plazas, and that's kind of the main kind of feature of the waterfront. So these are spaces that will be kind of climatically conditioned. One of the things that I didn't mention is actually the weather is quite mild, let's say 9 months a year, but then there is 3 months that it's actually very uncomfortable, it's very humid and very hot. And of course, people are recluded in their own kind of indoor spaces. And it's everything about air conditioning. So the whole idea was, how can we create the comfort for people to come out in the open space, and how can we create the conditions and the programs to actually make it kind of feasible. So we designed this kind of canopies, which have some program at the bottom, and also the canopies are kind of bioclimatic. It has different elements to work differently according to the temperature and the wind and the heat. So this is kind of this idea of how can you invest in the public space. So the open plazas would be oriented to take advantage of the prevailing winds. The canopies would be bioclimatic. So we'll be creating this kind of bioclimatic solution for the whole waterfront. Okay. So another idea would be this idea of kind of responsive or interactive spaces. So there will be different ways for people to kind of customize the public space and the different features in it. And here we can see a kind of a plan of these kind of bioclimatic canopies floating in the water. So the solution for the passageways was to think of them as kind of thematic passageways, to create this kind of attraction for people to walk more or to bike more. Also taking advantage of the orientation, which is east-west. How can we bring the breeze from the ocean into the passageway, but also how can we create this shaded space, and how can we create a more meaningful space that compared to what they are right now. So it will be created in stages, and we have all these kind of different programs. So the whole idea was not only to reconfigure the passageway itself, but also to open up the different retail spaces that are in those buildings, so that actually we would create a kind of also an interesting connection with the main street. And then for the Banyan Garage, as I was mentioning before, it's in a very good location, very close to the waterfront, so it has a huge potential for development. So At the competition stage, we were considering 3 different options. So the first one was reusing the structure as it is, 100%, and working on top of it. The second one was reusing 50%, and the third one was not reusing it at all. So at the competition level, we were considering the first one. So the whole idea was to kind of create a garage. And well, there was kind of several principles that were important for us. The first one was the public nature of the building. So no matter what the program was, there would be some kind of publicness to it. So we consider the circulation throughout the building as a kind of a strip that went up all the way to the terrace, which was conceived as a public space, as a square. So this is a section in which we see this kind of red loop that goes all the way to the terrace. These are the different diagrams that were, again, explaining these topics. So the renaturalization, so how can we introduce public space and green space in a public building? The vertical cores, the green core, there was a green core and a digital core that were both had also a bioclimatic kind of purpose. And this is the digital cord. Okay, we also introduced some other features to make the building as energy efficient as possible, and that meant to actually create the conditions so that you wouldn't need air conditioning throughout the whole year or throughout the whole building. So there was different degrees of conditioning for different kind of spaces and programs. And it's a vision from the garage, which is and this is the space, the buffer space in the garage. This is the reconfiguration of the garage building, and this is the buffer facade between the building and the exterior. So the whole idea again was to create this kind of green filters to enable some kind of natural conditioning without the air conditioning. So again, the idea was to introduce different kind of programs to be able to use the building for different kind of users. So it would be a kind of a building that would be open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So it's open to different users and different stakeholders throughout the different programs. So one of the programs that we were introducing was YMCA, which is a kind of a sports facility. We also introduced housing. We also introduced office space, public space, retail space and commercial space, public space. We're going to skip that, and then we're going to be watching this video. This video is from a very recent project that we developed for the University of Malaga in Spain. So it's a project that hopefully it will start its construction this fall. And it is interesting because I think it kind of, well, it's actually quite interesting in the context of the COVID, because many of the educational institutions are exploring the possibility of having class, some of the class activities outdoors. And this is actually something that we were exploring ourselves when we delivered this project. So the project is for the public space of the campus of Malaga University. And the whole idea was to kind of connect, make a kind of a stronger connection between the university and the city through this public space. So I'm going to be playing the video. Okay, and here is the video of the project.
Imagine an open university that integrates into urban life. Interactive public spaces that promote conversations between disciplines. Technologies and digital interfaces that boost knowledge sharing. In a natural, bioclimatically conditioned environment. Creating connected spaces that enhance exchange between students, teachers, and visitors. at the Universidad de Málaga connects existing facilities and opens up the campus to the public, creating a pedestrian walkway activated by hubs or public squares with learning and leisure spaces, incorporating technology to create an interactive urban environment connected to the digital world, an ecological corridor that efficiently manages resources, creating diverse natural landscapes. Pedestrian walkways protected by natural buffers become the perfect setting for meeting up, resting, and relaxing. Through a digital application, users can interact with the surrounding environment and access an augmented reality with academic and cultural content. The Climatic and Digital Hub integrates collaborative learning spaces, allows the interactive modification of environmental conditions, and generates all of the park's energy. The Hub's canopy hosts technological systems that connect users to the physical space and the digital environment. Along the boulevard, open classrooms are equipped to extend the university experience to public spaces. An extensive network of sensors generate open data that enables climatic research and allows real-time identification of the most comfortable zones of the boulevard. The tranquil Olive Grove's open library encourages reading and resting while promoting and protecting biodiversity. A connected, open, interactive, and green campus. An intelligent natural space with positive energy balance and bioclimatic comfort. A positive space where collaboration, creativity, and learning define the urban scene.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.